The Skull Island Netflix series just made its debut, and the first thing I want to say is, I'm disappointed. But not in a bad way. You see, with each new MonsterVerse premiere, my hopes get lower and lower to the point I'm at now, where with the announcement of a new show or movie, I brace myself for the inevitable clusterfuck. However, in the case of this show, I enjoyed the shit out of it. Here I am all revved up to write a scathing review of another kaiju-sized turd, and along comes this show to let me know there's actually hope for this universe. Bro, it was good, and I actually want to see more of it. There were moments in the show where I was in awe that they could accomplish the basics of storytelling that the most highly budgeted of recent films can't seem to figure out. They had a vision and ran with it, and it fucking paid off. I hope you understand how monumental that is for me. In this verse we call Monster, I found myself entertained and satisfied with a story that had nothing to do with Godzilla. That's right, get the fuck out of here, you bum. The plot follows the crew of the Once Upon a Maritime on an excursion to an uncharted island. Its captain, aptly named Cap, is a man whose life was changed forever when he stumbled upon an unknown monster. Now he and his colleague Hiro, along with their sons Charlie and Mike respectively, go on expeditions to search for and study these mysterious cryptids. However, on this particular journey, Charlie spots a girl, Annie, adrift at sea and saves her. Once aboard, they realize she comes from a nearby island and knows almost nothing about the outside world. They also discover that Annie's being pursued by a group of mercenaries. However, before they can figure out what's going on, a colossal marine titan attacks their ship, killing Hiro before his son's eyes, along with the rest of the unnamed crew. The ship is destroyed and the crew is split up, all landing ashore at the infamous Skull Island. Upon reaching the island, it becomes clear very quickly that this island is no tropical paradise. Creatures, the likes of which are new to the universe, lurk around every corner. Luckily, Cap discovers a group of mercenaries led by botanist Irene to party up with, though their effectiveness is questionable at best. Our two boys, Charlie and Mike, find their own sanctuary hiding behind the skirt of Annie, who turns out to be a capable survivor in this treacherous landscape. However, even with the assistance of her childhood friend, Dog, they find some of these monsters to be more than they can handle. None more so than the big man himself, Mr.Kong. I'm kidding, they don't call him that. Though the IMDb page does indeed call him Mr.Kong. What the fuck? Anyway, the first half of this 8-episode series follows our groups as they separately explore the island and realize that they won't be going anywhere so long as that ship-crushing, helicopter-swiping, whale-throwing dick is waiting beneath the waves.
My working theory is that it's a dick.
The second half of the series has our two groups come together to try to come up with a plan to get off the island. There's also a good amount of character development for Irene and Annie, as well as a heartbreaking backstory for Kong. The show is competent at setups and payoffs, as well as having actual character motivation for why events take place. This is something I never thought I'd say in the discussion of a MonsterVerse film. The big finale finally arrives where the group decides to lure Kong to the ocean to take on the kraken-like kaiju preventing their escape. I'll admit that though there are many scenes featuring a variety of monsters, the Kong action is a bit subdued in this brief series. However, I say that more as a statement of fact, rather than a complaint. I love the pacing of this show. I never felt rushed, nor like I was slogging through exposition. The human element to this series was more than able to carry the show in the absence of monsters, and in the end, we get a grand kaiju spectacle anyway. Honestly, I know I've said it several times already, but I cannot emphasize enough how competently the characters were written. I know many people complained about their simplistic designs, but at the end of the day, I'll be remembering these characters for who they were, not what they wore. I thought Cap, voiced by Benjamin Bratt, did a great job of portraying the sagely father figure of the group. A man who can weigh his options and is also genuinely intrigued by this new world around him.
I got nothing.
Irene turns out to be one of the most multi-layered characters in the show. I was consistently surprised by how many dimensions they gave to her character, and it made me want to know more about her. In front of her hired mercenaries, she displays a focused and commanding facade. Whereas in private, you see she's just a normal person with a very specific and emotional cause behind her actions. There's one moment in particular in this show that perfectly encapsulates the levels to her character.
Call the chopper. Tell them not to get too close unless we have eyes on the squid. Sam, can I show you something?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, this may seem like a small thing to you, but as someone who's been reviewing MonsterVerse films for years, my jaw dropped at seeing an actual human moment that made me feel something. I understand where she's coming from and ultimately want to know if she'll be successful in what she came for. Another example of a great character moment comes between Cap and Mike, who both share a mutual loss in Hero, and confide in each other how they feel about the loss, and how this will strengthen their relationship. In the same scene, we also get a casual exchange of information that I found refreshing.
By the way, you see the, monkey?
What monkey?
Too often in these movies, exposition drops come down like a fucking artillery strike, but this show manages to weave multiple elements together so that an emotional moment can tie together with communicating information between characters, as well as developing their arcs and relationships. What also blew my mind was that when a character makes a mistake or stupid decision, it's acknowledged and explained in a reasonable way. For example, at one point in the plot, Charlie and Mike stumble upon the mercenaries and see they are with Charlie's dad, Cap. Mike decides to surrender himself but tells Charlie to remain hidden. This results in Charlie going on his own adventure and discovering Kong's lair. As it turns out, though, Cap and the mercenaries were working together, meaning there was no reason for Charlie to hide. Now, in most other modern films, a moment like this would be written off as stupidity and used to get a character from point A to point B. However, in the following scene, we see Mike regretting his decision to tell Charlie to stay away, citing that he didn't have all the facts, was powering through a feverish infection, and being part of his character to make bad decisions. A callback to how he ignored the warnings to come to Skull Island in the first place. What a breath of fresh air for character motivations and stupid decisions to be acknowledged and supported by the narrative of the story. Now, I know I've been all rah-rah characters, but I'm sure some of you are wondering, well, what about that annoying Annie? Well, I'll agree she can be annoying. She's some gung-ho island hoe who thinks she can solve every problem with murder. However, she's no Mary Sue, as it is proved on multiple occasions that she's not as capable as she thinks. We're shown she has trouble taking full-grown men on her own, and that her lack of knowledge pertaining to present technology makes her easily susceptible to being subdued. She's basically the definition of fuck around and find out, and more than enough times, she finds out. That being said, she does at times come off as a bit one-note in terms of attitude, but there are glimpses to deeper workings and change in her character, and with the hinting of a second season, I'd love to stick around for her fish-out-of-water story. Now, if we're gonna talk about Annie, then we have to talk about Dog. I knew from the second I saw the trailer that he'd be around for the duration and would have his own personality and connection with Annie, but holy shit, do they take the time to develop this unexpectedly lovable guy. Make no mistake, I'm no sucker for cutesy animal pals in movies, but the level of development in this series really gave me a fondness for Dog. He's a tough guy just like his lady friend, and they both share a traumatic past that cemented their bond. Now, much like her, he has a hard time letting new people in. But he is an animal that grows and changes throughout the story. It may be small, but one of my favorite moments for Dog is when he's fleeing Kong and almost falls off a cliff. However, he uses his claws to climb, which we saw Charlie teaching him how to do earlier. Setup and payoff is such a beautiful thing. Hell, even the shipwreck itself has a meaningful payoff. Now, of course, we have to talk about Mr.Kong. And my dude, did this show develop him in a way that was incredibly engaging. It may just be that the show is animated, but the visual mannerisms they're able to pull off with him allows us to read his inner thoughts like a book. We understand when he feels loss or anger. We understand when he's frustrated and trying his best. We're shown that he fancies himself a badass, and what that will ultimately cost him. That's right, Kong makes choices and deals with their consequences, and those consequences are developed into a narrative payoff. I actually feel for this ass-scratching ape now, and it's not just because I keep hearing Patrice O'Neal's voice for his inner monologue. Character aside, we're given multiple examples of his power and fighting styles, and the end battle was awesome. I knew I could trust the animation team behind Castlevania to breathe life into the big guy. Honestly, the animation was better than I thought. I liked the little subtle movements of people's faces, and Save for a number of stale background shots, I really enjoyed the energy the animation brought to the screen. Now, I know I didn't mention too much about Charlie and Mike, and that's mostly because they don't really have much going on for him. Charlie is the timid kid who wants out of adventures before being dragged into the adventure of a lifetime. He's unsure of himself, and awkward, but he has a deeper strength of character that makes you root for him. The rest of the time, he's pretty whiny. His friend Mike is more confident, however, he doesn't have much to do in the plot except come to Charlie's rescue and eventually being a ticking clock for the plot, as the group tries to escape the island before he succumbs to his wounds. The end of the series leaves them in perilous cliffhangers, and we'll have to wait until next season to see what happens to them. So I'm counting on the show having plans for what's next. Ultimately, that's the biggest thing for me. At the end of this 8-episode run, I wanted more. I wanted more from a MonsterVerse product. Do you understand how ridiculous that sounds coming from me? That's like hearing Hitler say, that Jew's alright. Well, maybe it's not exactly like that, but it is unprecedented. I came away from this show with a deeper appreciation for Kong as a character, which I think is important above all. I was also completely blown away by the storytelling and character development in the series. I will say that at times this show does fall too deep into the quip pit. The quip pit being the tendency created by James Gunn Marvel movies for every character to be witty and awkward. Especially in the ant pit scene, we see the tension of the show cast aside in favor of in-the-moment quirky bits, which do work in small doses but absolutely tank the stakes when taken too far. We get it. You found a sword. Maybe instead of joking about it for 5 minutes, you acknowledge the immediate threat in front of you. You know, I wonder if that ant is the same one that Marlo mentioned in Kong Skull Island.
Sounds like a bird, but it's a fucking ant.
You know, I did appreciate the handful of references to the Skull Island film. Not only do we have a brief appearance by a character who took part in that expedition, but the show also takes a jab at one of its most memorable scenes.
Now, you're gonna tell me everything I want to know.
You don't need to point a gun at me.
Usually people need the show.
Ultimately, I think that just goes to show the level of care that was taken in developing this series. I get the feeling that there was a very specific and passionate idea for this show, and they did all they could to achieve it. In my honest opinion, they succeeded. As someone who's built a YouTube channel around bashing the MonsterVerse, I was pleasantly surprised by what I was given. Hope. Now, hope can be a dangerous thing in many cases. However, since I thrive on disappointment for most of my videos, I absolutely welcome a show I can get behind. For once, it's nice to be rooting for what I like, rather than throwing gas on a dumpster fire. Protect this show at all costs. It has potential and knows how to utilize it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to put it top tier all time in terms of entertainment, but as a Godzilla fan, and now I guess a Kong fan, I couldn't recommend it more highly. As a stark contrast to Godzilla Singular Point, where I was suffering to the end to see if my time was worth the investment, with Netflix's Skull Island, I enjoyed the journey on which I was taken. Anyway, I think I've done enough ball washing of this ape's grapes. Catch you later!